So the title for this is Mindfulness and Shabbat, a Divine Invitation to Rest and Reconciliation. And what I want to talk about two words that you should just keep in mind. These are Hebrew words. You probably are familiar with these words, but for people who probably are new to Hebraic roots or to Hebrew altogether, I'll be using these two words often: Shabbat, which means Sabbath, and Elohim, which is the first name of God that's introduced into the Bible right at the beginning of Genesis 1:1. In fact, from Genesis 1:1 to Genesis 2, verse 3, the name of Elohim, the name of God, is mentioned 35 times. So if I do use the word Elohim, no, I'm referring to the capital E of meaning God. And when I talk about, if I say Shabbat, I'm meaning Sabbath. So if you have a pen and pencil or your computer in front of you, and just jot these two Hebrew words if you're not familiar with them. I want to go right at the beginning of Genesis 1:1 to understand the mindfulness and the rest and reconciliation of what it means to be in a relationship with God, and really goes to the first verse of the Hebrew Bible. And this is going to be translated as slightly different of what you're used to, which is in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. I'm not going to go into much of the grammar, but a better, I would say, a more high definition Hebraic roots understanding of Genesis 1:1 would be at the beginning of Elohim creating the heavens and the earth, with a capital H and a capital E for earth. You will notice that there are two words that don't have a translation, and in Hebrew it's called et, and it's repeated twice: the et for the heavens and the et for earth. Just to give you a little Hebraic roots teaser, because you won't find an English translation for this Hebrew word, that represents the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet, the Aleph, which is on your right-hand side. And the Taf, which is right after the Aleph, is the last letter of the Hebrew alphabet. And what we're saying here is, as God is creating the heavens and the earth, he's also creating the language, the Aleph and the Taf, the Hebrew language of heaven, the Hebrew language of earth. So humanity and all of creation will be able to communicate with God. So in his grace and mercy, God created language in order for us to freely choose him and freely declare, I am with God. So that's a little Hebraic roots teaser for Genesis 1:1. But I really want to go into the first word of the Hebrew Bible, which is Bereshit, normally translated in the beginning, but I've translated here at the beginning of. Now, the word Bereshit is an awkward word choice. If we're talking about the chronological, the sequence of creation, I would never, ever use the word Bereshit. I would use a word that's more mainstream in understanding the unfolding of the 7 days of creation as Birashona, which means at first. So right away, we have an interesting word that shouldn't be starting off the Bible. And understand this, and Christians know this from the Gospel of John, the first verse: in the beginning was the Word. Now, that you should just stop in your tracks and just to say, what do you mean in the beginning was the Word? And what we're talking about is actually a heavenly Torah. It means God created a heavenly Torah, a heavenly word that's infinite, just like God is, and used it to create the world. That means the matrix of the entire world, not to get Keanu Reeves on you right now, but the real matrix, the binary code of creation, is the heavenly Torah. And what we got at Sinai was the finite words of a heavenly Torah. But the Torah is written in sort of a code sequence. Not everything is completely spelled out. We have these stories in Genesis, but we don't have the full story and background behind every single character. We do not know the childhood of Abraham. We only know him at the age of 75, getting this call from God to leave everything behind in Mesopotamia to go to a land that's unknown to him. He doesn't know where he's going. We know the story, hindsight 2020. He's going to end up here in Israel, where I'm speaking from. But we don't have the whole entire background. We have certain narratives that are there to teach us about a relationship with God. The Torah is not a history book. It's not a scientific book. It's a book about relationship. It's about God waiting for humanity to freely choose him. And we see God's grace and mercy throughout the entire Bible. So therefore, if God is using an awkward word, then it makes us stop in our tracks to ask the question, why is God using an awkward word? And in this case, in Genesis 1:1, it should really say Bereshonah at first instead of Bereshit at the beginning. Secondly, we have another problem. We have an awkward grammar structure. So in Hebrew, you should always start off with the subject. And the subject here is really God. It's not in the beginning. It's not the beginning is the subject. It's God. So if I was creating a Bible and I was creating the David Necroton version of the Bible, I would say Elohim created the beginning. That would make more sense in the Hebrew grammar structure. Not in the beginning, God, or at the beginning of God creating the heavens and the earth. That's a weird grammar structure. So because there's an awkward word choice and there's an awkward grammar structure, then it begs for us to excavate revelation. And that's what we're going to do in an attempt to excavate why is it that God chooses that his first word should be an awkward word choice and part of an awkward grammar structure. And the answer is, it is an anagram. The first Hebrew word of the Bible is an anagram. And this is how it looks. So what I've done for you is I actually transliterated the Hebrew letters for you for the Hebrew word Bereshit, which has a bet, a resh, an aleph, a shin, a yud, and a taf. And remember, the Hebrew alphabet has 22 letters. Now, if I rearrange these Hebrew letters, it will spell out a revelational nugget known as Yirat Shabbat, Sabbath awe. So I'm going to show you in a different way how we did this. We took the bet and the yud and we switched it, divided up the three letters into one word, the three other letters, to Yirat Shabbat. So what God did for us to stop us in our tracks because of an awkward grammar structure and an awkward word choice, God is telling us something very specific in the way he's creating the world, that the purpose for the world and why he created it is for humanity to celebrate the Sabbath. That means God's last creative act was his original intention. That's what Shabbat is. So when we're talking about Sabbath awe, we're not saying I need to be in awe of Sabbath. It means I have to develop my awe of God. That the 6 days in the week, I work, I deal what I have to deal with during the weekday, but when it comes to the Sabbath, I stop and I'm trying to develop my sense of awe of him. It is a portal in time, in essence, a tabernacle in time. So developing a sense of awe for God is both a process and the essence of what it means to be a human being. And Solomon wrote at the end of his famous book, now this is when Solomon is writing Ecclesiastes as a book that he has gone through all things in life. He was rich, he had a lot of women, and at the end of his book, in chapter 12, verse 13, he says, the end of the matter is to eternalize the awe of Elohim and safeguard his mandates, for this is the entire human being. What does it mean to be a human being from Solomon's perspective is to internalize our awe of God. It's a huge concept. I mean, I would think what differentiates me from the animal kingdom is my education, my intellect, my intellectual knowledge, and my language. There is a language for animals, but I never saw two cows decide, hey, you know what? It'll be great if we can go ahead and chop some trees and build a barn. We, as human beings, have created civilization. We've created all these technological advancements. We have used our intellect and our language to build up society. But we know because you're educated doesn't mean you will do the right thing. How will I go ahead and do the kingdom work for God? What will motivate me? What actually makes me a human being? Solomon gives us this clue. It is our matureness in our development for our awe of God. This is what Solomon has said. So Yirat Shabbat equals Yirat Elohim. That means Sabbath awe equals the awe of God, developing our awe of God. So each Shabbat is an opportunity to train ourselves to become the human beings God intended us to be. This is a huge revelation. This comes from the first word of the Hebrew Bible. So this is why it's very important to understand Hebraic roots and understand Hebraic context and understand the Hebrew language. God created this language. He used this language to create the heavenly word. He gave us the word in Hebrew, and the Hebrew language is nuanced. Plus, we have the finite Bible connected to the heavenly word. And God is purposely saying, I want you to take a moment before you continue the rest of the story of what's unfolding in the creation narrative. Know that my original intention is going to be my last creative act. That is Shabbat. What is unique about Shabbat is incredible, because I want you to pay attention to patterns that you're already used to when you're reading Genesis 1. There are phrases that appear in Genesis 1 but will not appear in Genesis chapter 2, verses 1 through 3, where we talk about the Sabbath. Namely, here are the phrases, the patterns. It was evening, it was morning. It could be day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5, day 6. You will never find it was evening, it was morning, it was the seventh day. The expression it was so, you will not find on Shabbat. God saw it was good. Elohim saw it was good. You will not find at the Sabbath from Genesis chapter 2, verses 1 through 3. You won't see that God said, God called, or God created. These patterns are patterns that are for the first 6 days of creation, but do not appear on the seventh day. Let us then go and explore Genesis chapter 2, verses 1 through 3. Again, I'm giving you more of Hebraic translation than probably that you have in your Bibles right now. And the heavens and the earth, with the capital H and the capital E, were completed in all their hosts. And Elohim completed with the seventh day what he did, and he ceased with the seventh day from his work that he did. Now we talk about he did, in Hebrew it's asa. And Elohim blessed the seventh day, and he sanctified it when he ceased from all his work which Elohim had created to do. La'asot, which comes from the word asa, but la'asot is a future. But we know for a fact that God didn't create anything after the sixth day, really, after he created Shabbat, which we'll learn in a second. Which means there's some work left undone. And this is where our partnership with God takes place. The la'asot is given to us to finish and repair this world that God has left into our hands. So we have a partner. This is where we know we have a partnership with God. I want to go back to the concept I talked about with the patterns. It was evening, it was morning, it was so. God uses familiar terms in unfamiliar ways. I want you to get used to this phrase, because we're going to be delving into a specific phrase that was used on the first 6 days of creation, but not for Shabbat. Wasn't used for Shabbat. So everyone is familiar with it in the evening and in the morning. As I said before, it was the first day. That appears on every single day besides the Sabbath. Now, evening and morning can only happen when you have the sun. And the sun, we know, was created on the fourth day. So the term that we're used to, evening and morning, has a different connotation from God's perspective in Genesis chapter 1. God is using of this familiar term, and he's going to flip it a little bit and use it in an unfamiliar way. So I'm going to let you know right now, what you think is usually translated, it was evening and it was morning, actually does not mean it was evening, it was morning in a Genesis 1 God perspective in unfolding the creation narrative. So let's go into that. So we already know that Erev, here's another Hebrew word. So we have Shabbat, we have Elohim. I want you to now take your pen and pencil or your computer, just to add another word into your vocabulary called Erev, which usually means evening, and Boker means morning. Dr. Lee knows these words very well, because every time he comes to Israel, he will say Erev Tov, good evening, or Boker Tov, good morning. That is a post-Genesis chapter 1 translation. And so God is going to use these words in a different way because the sun was not created. We can't have evening and morning if we don't have the sun. Okay, even the fact that God created light on the first day is not sunlight. It's a different type of light. So what does evening and morning mean? What does Erev and Boker mean? I want to go what those Hebrew terms mean. And Erev and Boker have an alternative Hebrew translation, which means mixed. Erev means mixed, and Boker means clear. So with that, now we can understand from a Genesis chapter 1 God perspective in unfolding creation that Erev is chaos and Boker means order. So what you're in essence happening on each day of creation, for the first 6 days of creation, God is making order out of chaos. And every single day he's adding more order. So this is a better translation in my humble perspective in understanding the creation narrative of what God is trying to accomplish. So if God is trying to make order out of chaos, then we can understand why these Erev and Boker does not appear on the seventh day, does not appear on Shabbat, because Shabbat does not have chaos. Everything is completed. So let me just prove it to you. Let's go back to Genesis chapter 1 Genesis chapter 2 verse 1 through 3. And the heavens and the earth were completed in all their hosts. That means literally it's a repeat from what happened at the end of Genesis 1, but everything is completed. That means there is no chaos. So when you come into Shabbat, there is free of chaos. It is only completeness. That's what we have. So let us continue to understand a little bit more, because this is really going to the crux of what Shabbat is going to be about. And in Genesis chapter 2, verse 3, we have two words that what is God creating on the seventh day? He's actually creating Shabbat. He's creating a day. And I know you take it for granted that you have 7 days in a week, but you shouldn't. Because what's quite fascinating is ancient civilizations never had 7 days in their week. Ancient civilization had 10 days in their week, like the Egyptian civilization. Other ancient civilizations had 13 days in the week. If you think that 7 days in the week wasn't played around in modern day history, after Stalin wanted to get rid of religion in Russia and wanted 6 days in his week. After the French Revolution, they tried to introduce a 13-day week to get rid of religious influences, but Napoleon eventually abolished that. So when you have 7 days in a week, that is literally a divine concept. Don't take it for granted. So 6 days, there is what God did was he took chaos and made it into order. But on the seventh day, he made a tabernacle in time. He created Shabbat, where it is free from chaos. It is complete order. But he did something that is magnificent on this day. We know that the translation is that he blessed it and he sanctified it. But the thing is that we have to understand what that blessing means. Now, thank God we know what blessing means, because in Genesis chapter 1, God blesses the anything that's living in the seed or anything that's flying in the air. And he's telling them to be fruitful and multiply. He also applies that blessing to be fruitful and multiply to the human beings. So we know that blessing in Genesis chapter 1 means more of. But God is not saying to be fruitful and multiply on the seventh day. He just blesses the seventh day. So in absence of anything that God is blessing, what does it mean? It means that he is amplifying, making more of himself available on the Sabbath than any other day in the week. There's an amplified presence. Now, kadosh usually means sanctification or holy. But the best way I can give you, the best way I can understand this word kadosh is actually transparency. And the way I can explain this is that there are certain people that we have that we have encountered in life that have an amazing relationship with God. And when you're in their presence, you're like, there's no conversation that's happening, but you walk away saying, I need to do a little bit more for God in my affirmation of my faith with him. So what we talk about, that type of person that has that type of relationship, the reason why you're feeling that is because that person is transparent. So here, God is, what he's doing on the seventh day is creating more of himself in a most transparent way. So that is the seventh day in essence. It is a day free from chaos, and there's more of God on that day. So God, right from the beginning, as we learned, let's say summarize for a moment. God, right from the beginning, always had Shabbat in mind. That's from the first word of the Hebrew Bible. That his last creative act was his original intention. And on that day, he provides both his amplified presence and his transparency. What's the purpose for that? As an invitation. God has invited us into his presence, to his amplified, transparent presence. For the purpose of what? To develop what it means to be a human being. So, you could take away the, Elaine, if you wish, you could take away the, thank you. Just to summarize for a moment here, because we did a lot in about a half hour. Number one, Sabbath is not about me. It's not about a vacation day. If you want to take a vacation, take a vacation. Sabbath, what we learned from here is it's God's original intention. God has put this invitation right at the beginning of the world. You don't need an explicit mandate that you need to go ahead and celebrate the Sabbath. It's right there. If God is going ahead and doing this, and he's doing this for the purposes of what? For us to develop our awe of him. And what do we know about our development of awe? If you go to Psalm 34, thank God. God has provided the schedule, the training session of what that means. And if you go to Psalm 34, it says, come children, verse 12 through 14 through 15. Come children, hearken to me. I will teach you the awe of Adonai, of the eternal. Who is the person who desires life, who loves days to see goodness? Guard your tongue from evil, and your lips from speaking deceitfully. Remove evil and do good. Seek peace and pursue it. 4 aspects of what it means to develop your awe of God. And the first one is guard your tongue from evil, your lips from speaking deceitfully. What this really means is that we have to put a 24-hour security system on our mouth. Why? Just like God created the world and created life with his word, we also know what it means that we use our language could also destroy a person. It could destroy the world. So the first thing we have to do if we're going to be like God and develop our awe of him is we have to take in consideration our words. And so that means when we come to the Sabbath, our talk, our discussions on the Sabbath has to be something that uplifts people. Has to take into consideration, what have my words done to people for the past week, and what do I need to do to improve my language to help uplift others? We don't have much time to go into any other aspects of the training manual, but I encourage you to review Psalm 34 to understand more what it means to be in the development of your awe of God. And with that, I'm going to ask Brad to come on and continue the discussion.
Which Brad? Sure, who's there? Thank you. Thank you, David, for that lecture. We appreciated that, and it's an honor to have you to deliver that first Dwight Pryor Memorial Lecture. Now, when we talk about Shabbat, just for conversation, and Professor Brad Young is there, it was given on Mount Sinai in Exodus 31. Is that correct?
No, I'm saying to you that Sabbath is right at the beginning of creation.
Yeah.
Right at the beginning of creation. What happens at Sinai is that the people of Israel now are having a different stewardship with the Sabbath.
Okay.
Okay. The stewardship will be in reflection ultimately of what happens with the tabernacle, okay, which we don't have much to go into right now.
Sure.
But the invitation is for all of humanity. So I'm not saying that people have to do an Orthodox Jewish practice of the Sabbath, because that's not what you're mandated to do. Jews have a different stewardship with the Sabbath that's different than the rest of the world, which is more related to the tabernacle than anything else.
Okay.
But this is the point. The point is that most people think that Sabbath is about in the Ten Commandments. And I'm saying to you, it's prior to the Ten Commandments.
It is, yes.
It's right at the beginning of the world. There's no reason why God creates a separate day. It's not for him to go ahead and take a vacation, sit on the beach and sip Mai Tais. It's for us to go ahead and accept that invitation and proclaim that I accept this Sabbath as an affirmation of God the Creator and what he's doing in my life, and then I'm developing my sense of what it means to be a human being.
It's powerful. And yes, Brett, Professor, come in.
Oh, this is so wonderful. I've enjoyed this presentation and this discussion. What came to me is what Jesus said: the Sabbath was made for man. Now, most people don't realize that when he said the Sabbath was made for man, that it goes back to Genesis 1. Because after God created the wonderful world, the garden, the heavens, the earth, this beautiful place, he said, and this is mindfulness, this is very powerful mindfulness, come celebrate Shabbat with me. Man was created on the eve of Shabbat, on the eve of Sabbath. And one of the wonderful things I think that we experience in Jerusalem, and of course, this would happen in every Jewish community, is on Friday, you'll be hearing people say, Shabbat Shalom. And one of the first words we study when we begin with Jewish roots is Shalom. It means so much more than peace. It means completeness, a time of spiritual renewal, mindfulness that you will have the right kavanah for the day, for the week, every week, to have this time with family, to renew yourself, but to think that this Sabbath experience was created for every human being. And then, sometimes it can become such a burden, or there's some other things. Jesus was, I think, very much a part of the school of Hillel and many others that wanted to make the Sabbath a joy, a delight, not to make it a burden. And I think what David is saying is that there is such a great way in seeing the universal call of Sabbath for all people that we need times of rest and restoration, that we can come together as a family and enjoy that real shalom. And I think in mindfulness, there is a part of shalom. When we talk about the marketplace, sometimes a businessman needs to take a time for mindfulness to reconnect with God, disconnect from all the distractions, but to really reconnect with God and have that foundation for mindfulness in the marketplace.
This is interesting, because when we think of Exodus in 31 on Mount Sinai, and God meets up with Moses, and he talks about the Shabbat. God gives the Shabbat as a sign of the covenant between me and you, and then he gives the 2 tablets of stone inscribed by the finger of God. And this is the Mount Sinai experience, David, right? In Exodus 31. So you are bringing a fantastic revelation that the invitation that was created in the beginning comes alive to the man of Moses and gives it to him as a sign of a covenant.
I would actually say that anyone who believed in God the Creator, and then when Abraham came on the scene, and Isaac and Jacob,
right?
Anyone who was a biblical character who had faith in God, man or woman, actually celebrated Sabbath. Now, we don't know how it looked, but inherent in a belief of God is the celebration of Sabbath.
Yes.
In my book, in Your Sabbath Invitation, I actually go in and show you specifically in Hebrew where we show that biblical characters celebrated God in different mandates that come out later on after the Mosaic covenant. But I want to make it very clear to your listeners who are Christian. I want to make this very clear. This has nothing to do with salvation. This has to do with affirmation of faith that God built in the DNA of creation the concept of Sabbath. That's why 7 days in a week is divine. That's why time is divine. Most people think time is just, seconds on the clock. But the idea of a past, present, and future, when God created light on the first day, it's not light. It's a familiar word used in an unfamiliar way. Or is linear time. What God created was linear time, past, present, and future. Because in his grace and mercy, if we're going to be freely choosing God, God is saying that your past will never overwhelm you to have a future with him if in the present moment you say yes. This is a huge concept that happens on the first day. So what most people think is light is actually linear time. That's what God is creating. And then later on, he creates something called cyclical time on the fourth day with the stars and the moon and all the hosts there. He's creating something called cyclical time. But we don't have much to go into, but I just want you to understand that the concept of time is a huge introduction into the world, because most people, if you don't believe in God, then everyone thinks that this second is the same as the next second coming. And it's really not, because every second in the world that we are living in is an opportunity to sanctify his will, to be in relationship with God. And you can change in 1 second if you feel like you're falling away or you don't have this relationship. Once you say yes, there's no excuse of saying, it's too overwhelming. I did so many sins in the past, I can't have a relationship with God. Well, God created time, and God created past, present, and future. Then once you say yes, you have a future.
Professor.
Yeah, I was just thinking how important this is to think about the creation of time and the fact that we are making time sacred so that we can have this relationship with God. Shabbat, which is a time for family restoration. But I was thinking of, I really found this when I was translating Hebrews. I'd just like to read one verse here from Hebrews, the very first chapter. God, in times of old, on many specific occasions and through many effective ways, spoke to our ancestors through the Hebrew prophets. Now, in these final days, he has spoken to us definitively through his Son, whom he appointed heir in line to inherit everything, through whom he made the eons of time. And you think when you say Breshit bara, in the beginning, God created, really, I think what we're seeing is that he is creating these eons of time. And in time, there are appointed times, Shabbat, Passover, these tremendous feasts of the Lord. And these are times that we reenact God's redemption. I think it's good for us as Christians to remember when we found the Lord, when we accepted Christ, when we made a faith commitment. Today we're commemorating the great teaching of Dwight Pryor, who kind of sensitized us to the sense of sacred time. I love the way that Abraham Joshua Heschel would say, Shabbat is an eternity in time, that's a time that we fellowship with God. I think it's wonderful how you can bless your children or pray for your wife. Wife prays for a husband, and we celebrate the goodness of God in so many powerful ways.
Amen.
So
Amen.
we can have mindfulness in our faith and our experience every day, week by week. But I think it's very clear here in Hebrews, there's a sense that God was speaking through the Hebrew prophets. God was speaking through Jesus when he came. Us as Christians, we really understand that Jesus is speaking, but it's in this time frame. Time is very important for God.
Well, you turn back. C.S. Lewis said it beautifully when he said eternity meeting time in the present. And yes, and this is why we have to end this session. And I've got my guitar, and I've got David Necrutman, and I've got Professor Brad Young. And what we want to do is sing the Shema.
Yes.
And I know David, let's just enjoy the Shema and remember, hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. And you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. David, join me. Shema Israel, Adonai Elohim, Adonai Baruch Shem Mahuto Leolam Amen. David, thank you very much. It's a blessing to hear you and for you to join us.
Dr. Lee, this is a miracle. This is what we call a ness. You have brought us all together today, Jews and Gentiles, Jews and non-Jews coming together, Jews and Christians coming together for understanding what it means to be mindful. And just know this, that Shabbat becomes the portal, the time portal for mindfulness to develop us as human beings.
Wonderful. Praise the Lord. Professor Brad Young, this is the beginning of bringing the Hebrew understanding together with the Greco-Roman mindset, and so that we have the fullness or mindfulness of this God and be blessed. And we will see you later at the panel discussion, and this will be a really mindful moment as we come back to finding out who we are in Christ and what is our finding our meaning and purpose to live this life in honor of Him. David, once again, bless you. Thank you from all of us here around the world to Israel. We are praying for Jerusalem. We are praying for Israel. Bless you and keep you.